to Charting Change in Legal. What's up? I'm Ari Kaplan. I am an analyst that covers the legal industry and honored to be here with my co-host.
How do I follow that? I'm Caroline Hill, editor-in-chief of Legal IT Insider. It's good to be here with you, Ari. Nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you. It's been 50 something episodes, and I'm feeling very confident someone is watching this one. Someone
I
is going to
think, you know
listen.
what?
I have like deeply strong feeling about this. So we are going to add double, triple our listeners. Anyway, it's been a very exciting end to the first quarter, and I think it's an interesting start to the second quarter. And I'm looking forward to lots more events that are coming up. So we should see each other certainly at Lexpo for sure. And I'll also be in London. I'm going to be going to Relativity Fest London, and I think there's a lot happening, a lot of excitement. So
That is so exciting. I didn't know you were coming to Railfest. That is super cool. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. No, I think it's already heating up, isn't it? My diary is already like jam packed. Lexpo is exciting though in Amsterdam. I haven't done that one before, and it's super cool to be supporting Rob Amir, and I think it's the 10th anniversary you said, and I know
10th anniversary of
you've
Lexpo,
been
and I
involved
was
for years
I
and
was a
years.
speaker at Lexpo 1 in 2016, and it was great then. And I have been lucky to serve as the MC for the past 5 years. And it honestly is such an exceptional event, not just because I'm associated with it, but because Rob and his team have figured out a way to draw the most dynamic and sort of high level decision makers and give you a forum to get to meet them all. That's really the special secret sauce there, is that all the people you want to meet come, and you get many opportunities to interact with them. And I just love that about the event, and I try to do everything I can as the MC. Forget about the content and the venue and everything, but I just think the mix is special. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there.
I cannot wait. I
Yeah,
cannot wait.
yeah.
Yeah, no, great. And that's you're absolutely right. And I think yeah, it's already a year to be selective with your time. I think people took that away from last year. So the sort of chasing our tails, going to every single thing under the sun. I think people are a little bit done with that. I think that the time this year is going to be a year for being, well, we're already in April, for goodness sakes. But anyway, but it'll be a year for being a bit more selective with your time and choosing events exactly where you get the right mix of people and are able to have those really great conversations. Otherwise, why are you there?
It's fun to me to think about this idea of it being the year of something or something else, because I feel like in AI years we're moving at such a rapid pace that I don't actually know what this year is gonna be, because people ask me, and I always think I'm not really sure, right? I mean, ChatGPT came out at the end of 2022, and I think people thought that year was going to go in one direction, and then it completely shifted in a pretty extraordinary way. I will say that I missed out on something in Amsterdam. I did the Amsterdam Triathlon last year and registered early, and not realizing that that race closes super fast, and so I will not get to swim in the Amstel this year. But I
Stop
think I think
showing off.
I think Rob
Stop
will be happy
showing
about that.
off. The
Yeah,
most
well,
of
it
the
was
mo- we can I can race to the bar, Ari. Like
it wasn't such a long race, so there's no showing off there. But I will say that one of the things I'm very excited about is that I just released a report studying how law firms in 14 countries are thinking about and measuring the ROI of their use of legal AI. I did that with Legora, so it was specifically Legora customers, but it was a broader conversation than that, and really remarkable to have conversations with people who are thinking very deeply, not only about adoption and deployment and building community and work quality and workflows, but just how do we effectively measure performance? How do we gauge the impact on the overall business of law? It was a very lucky project, and just interesting to see the reaction.
that's so cool. And so you interviewed, what was it, just slightly north of 30
Yeah,
law firms.
31 law firm leaders.
Yeah.
Most of them were partners, or well, there was a group of partners and sort of decision makers in innovation and AI, and just asking a series of questions about. how are you reallocating the time that you're saving? Where are you getting value? Are you getting projects that you otherwise wouldn't have taken? How is it affecting business development? What does revenue look like? How does profitability, how is that affected? And it was just fascinating. And people are very generous to talk about this, especially in a forum where you're holding what they say in confidence, but aggregating it so that it builds something of value for the entire community. And I kept telling them, my goal is to help Legora help you. That was really, what the objective was, is to try to better understand where they're gaining value, where they're having challenges, so that the team there, which is, just exceptional, honestly, like I'm a neutral, as you know, industry analyst. I'm Switzerland, but when I ask people how would you recommend, what would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, and people give it a 9 or a 10, and so many people do that. You recognize that they're trying to do something that's important for the space. And I know that there's a lot of great vendors out there. I'm just saying, in this instance, I studied them, and there was a lot of very positive value. And I only hope that this kind of research elevates our entire community,
Yeah.
because other teams can learn from this. And I think that was their goal. Certainly it's always my goal, is how do we take this research that's focused on a particular area and use it to give an advantage to everyone. When I just also released my general counsel report. And when I do that, I also hope that law firms gain equal or even more value than just leaders
Yeah.
of law departments, because there's a collaboration, right? We all work together. And if one learns something about the other, that just heightens the experience for everyone.
So these firms, were they US based? Were they global with a mixture
They
of?
were firms in 14 countries. So it was a
Okay.
mix, definitely US firms, but certainly firms throughout Europe and Asia. And it was meant to try to draw a line through what firms are doing, but recognize that different firms have different individuals who are handling this, who are responsible for the rollout and just usage of their legal AI platform. And it's different in different organizations. Some people have a more significant legal operations component, and so they look at it through a lens of metrics and other analytics. Some are partners at their firms, and they're responsible, so they're looking at very much from a use case from the juniors to the seniors. And which juniors, I asked not only are associates or partners or knowledge management leaders getting the most value, but if they are associates, who within the associate class? Is it the juniors? Is it mid-levels? Is it seniors? And, are the people who are performing well getting value, and what does that look like? Are the people who are not performing as well, is that helping them? Is their work being enhanced by this? And, a lot of interesting metrics and takeaways that I hope people will get value from.
Was your overall takeaway? So it is fascinating. My conversations around ROI, I'm sometimes surprised at how um I don't know how to express this without sounding negative, but like you'd have thought that ROI would be the first and foremost consideration, but it's not. For a lot of law firms, they think, and maybe this is the right thing. There's lots of reasons behind this. Gen AI is a different beast. People are experimenting with how it's used. Sometimes the ROI isn't going to be clear. Take away all of that. But I've always been a bit surprised by how they think, oh, we'll get to ROI. I've spoken to a couple of firms with huge rollouts, including of Legora, where ROI they've said, oh yeah, we're convinced that it was going to provide value, but they're not there putting metrics at the front and center of their decision making, which I thought was kind of interesting. Did that come across strongly?
There were definitely conversations about how you define ROI, how you prioritize ROI. And I had a great follow-up conversation on my podcast with Nick West at Mishcon Durea, who's a leader, obviously, in this space. And Nick and I had a long conversation about what does value look like? What does ROI look like? What are the most important metrics that you should capture? And in this conversation, I was honest about what we were trying to achieve. And I don't think that there is a mandate to force ROI conversations, nor is there uh, a free pass on gauging ROI. I mean, every organization is making an investment, not only of time, but certainly of money, and they're budgeting for this, and they're thinking about it long term. So this has to be part of the conversation. People are in different places in their journey, and some have just deployed, some have been doing this for years, and as a result, one size doesn't fit all. But I tried in every section of this report to give suggestions. So, for example, if you're trying to measure the performance of your junior and mid-level lawyers, for example, try to connect realization rates year over year, or try to find some way to gauge progress, because those are numbers that you have, right? Firms are excellent at keeping track of their time, and they're excellent at keeping track of how much of that time they've gotten paid for. So those are easy numbers. And the other point that I tried to make was that this cross collaboration between disciplines within a firm is only growing, that it can't just be the superstars in innovation and knowledge management and AI. It has to also be the talented folks in time and billing. It has to be individuals in IT. It really just has to be this cross-functional journey. And I think that's really important. I just want to tell people that you can download it. It's lagora.com/ROI-law-firms. So
Say it
fairly
again because I was
easy. Yeah.
laughing. Say it again because I was laughing.
Oh, sorry. Lagora.com/ROI-law-firms.
Interesting. Yeah, go download it. It's interesting that you talk about reallocating time as well. Like I know we must move on briefly because obviously we have such an agenda always, Ari. Like we need
It's crazy. Yeah.
but like so you preface it with how they're reallocating time. So by that, presumably, then most of them were saying that they were seeing this sort of they were gaining time back.
Everyone 100% are saving time, but time isn't really an ROI sort of component. It's much more about what will you do with that time. The return will be in having more time to take on work you otherwise would have declined, or the technology allowing you to scale in a way that was otherwise not possible. Could you now do a project that would have taken a team of lawyers a week to a couple of lawyers and a really talented paralegal just a day? And are there projects that were too document intensive? And is there a way to view it across the spectrum? I mean, there was a lot of discussion about thinking through projects and being able to serve clients in a way that you otherwise weren't able. Obviously, law firms are already providing super high quality work. So the question wasn't, what is that? But, trust in the work, response time. There were just so many areas where there were improvements in the experience. And law firms will this year, I think, really be able to measure ROI in a way that is meaningful. And if I'm honored and lucky enough to do it again next year, I think that we will get much richer data, and there will be a way to do a year-over-year comparison that's really important for our industry.
I'd love to see. It's a tangent, but it's so relevant. I'd love to see them really dive into also who is doing what and what impact that has on our ROI. Because I feel like one of the things that's being overlooked is how new technology will change who is doing what. So, for example, I've referred to partners perhaps doing research that they would have handed off to an associate, and they because it's there within their workflow, because they can instantly ask a question and they'll have the citation and they can immediately, I mean, a lot of this is they would know anyway, but but the point is that things that they would have naturally just handed off because it would take a little bit more time, it can be done pretty instantly. What impact is that going to have on who is doing what, and what impact is that going to then have on ROI? What does it all mean? I feel like it's a tangent, but it's equally super relevant. And then in terms of preparing for things to change and training people to do things differently, I think it's relevant completely.
I was lucky to help to co-facilitate a luncheon this week in Washington, D.C. with Lucy Allen, who's the Chief Growth Officer at Barbary, who's now, and a special congratulations to her, who is now the co-CEO of Barbary, which was just announced. And we were lucky to host an incredible cross-section of knowledge management, innovation, professional development, training and development, just all of these really exceptional leaders that aren't often brought together. There are events for knowledge management. There are events for professional development. There are events for innovation. We don't typically bring those groups together, and yet exactly your point, we are seeing a shift in who's getting the work, where the work is being distributed. This technology is enabling senior professionals to rely less on some of their junior support team because the answer is right there for them, and they're becoming very adept because it's easy to use, and the answers are increasingly trustworthy. So the vetting isn't as crucial in it for a basic question that relies on a proven document set. And so we had this great conversation, and it was just helpful, as you know, because we both are lucky to facilitate some of these discussions, to bring people together to try to work out the issues. And Lucy was great in teasing out some of those really important points. And I think that you're going to see that being a real focus this year, just in terms of how do we rebalance the training and development. The one thing that came out of this research, and that has come out of a lot of my discussions over the course of the past few months, 6 months, because I was just at Legal Week, is that the exceptional service and technology that a company like Legora is providing, but also let's just be even here, Lexis Protege, Harvey, there are a lot, Clio, right? There are a lot of teams, Thomson Reuters, there are a lot of teams that are competing in this game. But the emphasis on exceptional client service and great technology and following a roadmap that's realistic and honest, I think is really leveling up everyone's game. And it's great for the buyer. That, I think, is just a general observation and perspective that only helps all of us in legal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I mean, there's all sorts of challenges. I'm speaking to people a lot about strategy, and it's interesting because we're doing a lot of inside view. So we're speaking with market leaders on a podcast called The Inside View, and I'm preparing for one. And he wants to talk about some of the funding that's coming into the sector, which obviously Lugoro is one, and then there's many others. And it's really interesting. It's to this sort of like the people's sort of perception of that, and people's the challenges, if it does present any challenges. I think that there's I think that there's so much being driven, that there's a real energy in the sector, and I think that's great for everybody. I think that there's also just like a tiny bit of like just nervousness, like, is this sustainable? This has to be sustainable. I think that's something for all vendors to be really focused on with their clients, making sure that they feel that everything they're doing right now is sustainable.
Listen, money in the space is great for everyone. I'm positive about the investments. They know, certainly the people who are putting their money here know generally more than we do and have done a lot of due diligence on this. And we saw this. We've seen this in cycles. Right? I've been studying this space for almost 20 years. This is actually my 20th year and of being on my own as Ari Kaplan Advisors. And
Oh,
we've
Ari.
seen. I know. It'll be awesome. It'll be in June and at Lexpo. So there you go.
Oh,
No, but I just think it's really important for us to not be distracted in some ways by areas we can't control who puts money where. I think that the money talks about the importance of the space, but we saw this. We saw this with CLM. We've seen this
yeah.
with e-discovery. We've seen questions about numbers and valuations. I think that is almost like a side story, at least for what I do. I'm trying to make sure that we focus on what tools are people using, where are they getting value, are we training people properly, are clients being served, are people avoiding mistakes. And that was one of the things that I asked in my research, was like, is the level of trust, is it becoming
Mm.
trust, are you built, is the judgment, all of these components that we've been talking about. And
Mm.
just to try to start a conversation. The cool thing about releasing the research was there were a lot of comments in the various LinkedIn posts about people digging through and asking questions. And I was very happy to have a conversation, because each conversation kind of leads us closer to an answer. And that's, I think, what a lot of people are trying to get to.
Yeah, I was saying that we're in this privileged position as well. Like, it was in this same prep call with the inside view. was saying that we're in this privileged position of reflecting dialogue that helps to advance the conversation, right? I never particularly, sometimes I'll post opinion pieces but a lot of the time I'll post reflections on my conversations with people. I don't really feel like there's a definitive answer to a lot of things right now, but actually what there is amazing conversations that we're lucky enough to present to present to to give a public view to, which I think is a very privileged position to be in. But yeah, it's kind of fun. Do you know what my biggest takeaway I think from our conversation today is that AI years are like dog years. I think, Ari, that's a
Yeah, and the I was trying to explain to somebody how I think some things are changing, and I was laughing that when after I graduated college in 1993, I was lucky to spend a year living in Japan. So I was an English teacher through something called the JET program, and I was in a public high school in Kobe, outside Kobe, and I would always make a mistake about taking the local train versus the express train because everything is certainly in 1993, 94. Everything was absolutely in Japanese, and I was a little embarrassed, and my Japanese wasn't very good, and I didn't want to keep asking people questions, and so I would end up taking the wrong train. And I said, we're now in a moment where certainly in legal services, if you ever saw like a map on the New York City subway, for example, there are express lines, there are local lines, and so the express lines just have fewer dots. There are just fewer stops that you need to make in the same way that a partner may not need to make one of those stops with an associate, but may need to do that with a senior associate. And so I just kept thinking like we're getting faster and we're stopping less, but we're getting to the destination earlier, and by getting there earlier, there are other things that you can do to enhance the experience. And I was trying, because I'm always trying to think of a visual. I do a lot of
Yeah, it's a
infographics.
really good
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
It's a
yeah. And
great
I was
one.
just
And the
thinking
AI
about that.
dog years, because I love it. It's like AI years are not like normal years. So obviously each AI, I don't know whether it's, but so I wrote, you and I spoke about orchestration though, given the speed of things that are happening. And I wrote a piece last week actually about the importance of orchestration. And that came up again. And I thought about, actually I wrote it, yeah, I wrote it this week. And I thought about our conversation about how orchestration, because of the speed of which things are moving, this need, and I think I described it as you need an innovation spine. So you need to have something that holds everything together, that enables you to maintain it, like make sure that you're in charge still, even if it's there's a heavy degree of automation, and eventually agentic AI. You need to have this spine through which everything kind of slots into, and that's orchestration. And this is something that's super fascinating. It's on legaltechnology.com. I call it Innovation Needs a Spine, if anyone does want to have a look. But I really thought about our conversation about how orchestration, given the speed of things, is coming up more and more.
And I have to say, I'm super excited about this. So next month on May 5th, I am the MC of the LexisNexis AI Symposium at the Harvard Club in New York City. And I am excited to hear Jeff Bleich, who is the general counsel of Anthropic, deliver a fireside chat discussion. And I think it'll be just, there are lots of leaders who are going to be there and in the various panel discussions, but that that is an element of what's changing our industry that I think will be just a powerful part of the conversation, which is important for us to be having. Just where is this? How much change can we consume at once? And
Yeah.
everyone I talk to is like, "Gosh, doesn't it seem faster?" I'm like, "It seems faster." And I joked that we were talking on our discussion about the general counsel report that the general counsel is every year I do this general counsel report. This is year 7, and we try to characterize the general counsel. And in 2020 they were the chief legal officer and chief medical officer, and then they became sort of chief procurement officer and chief transformation and global diplomat, et cetera. And this year was sort of the unfazed general counsel because you imagine someone juggling, and then you imagine putting one pin on fire and then all the pins on fire and then adding spikes to all the pins, and that's kind of like what's happening. And it's just and then balancing on a ball and holding a rake like the cat in the hat. And I just think that there's a really interesting element here of just being super versatile, and that being the core component. So orchestration and versatility. Let's call those two at least two of the words of the year.
I see. I speak to less general counsel. I speak to a lot of head of legal operations, and I see them being, it's, you can't generalize. There's so many people at different stages, so many different size, so many, often it does correlate to the size of the company and to the size of the team and the resource and all of that kind of stuff in terms of the level of advancement. But I hosted a webinar with Harvey, and actually, I have to tell you, it was our largest. We were oversubscribed. We had well over 1,000 people sign up for that webinar, which was kind of funny because we were like, what happens now? Does it just fall over? But anyway, but so, and Russell Dempsey, who's the head of legal operations at Harvey, we were talking about agentic AI. That was one of the purposes of the conversation. We had Joe Cohen from Harvey, and we had Millie Lehman, who's one of the engineers. And we had this really practical conversation about agentic AI. And actually, one of the things, so Russell's got a big team, but comparatively big team. So he has like 7 operations people in his team. The legal team is about 300 people, 250 lawyers. And they're advanced, right? And they've been using Harvey. They want an early adopter, but they are taking, still taking a cautious approach. They're very much wanting to be in control. The Russell's whole messaging was around, we need to be in charge of this. We're not going to take any risks. They're not a heavily regulated industry, so they can do things that perhaps banks and they've got different concerns. But yeah, it was just interesting. I just really thought that was his whole vein was they're doing some exciting stuff. They're doing a lot of automation, and they're probably further ahead than a lot of people in terms of workflows and automating workflows. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that they're not doing some really cool stuff, but I was just interested, that there's still that tone of we need this to be governed. We need to be in charge. We need to be in charge of this.
Well, I actually read, so Richard Tromans shared a piece that Gabe, one of the co-founders of Harvey, wrote for X. And so I read Richard's analysis and then I read Gabe's piece about agents and the use of agents. And it fascinates me. There are 2 things that I read this week that I found really interesting. I found Gabe's piece really interesting, and also the 2 Skadden leaders who are now advising. One is advising Harvey, and the other is advising Latera, and I forget the other company, but it was in law.com, and it was fascinating. I actually put that into Notebook LM so that I could listen to the analysis of what they were saying, and it was just fascinating. And I've started doing that a lot more. Like I'll take, the annual report, for example, Larry Fink's annual report, and put it into a Notebook LM just to listen to how they are talking about it and pulling out key themes. And it was fascinating. I'll just say that the most interesting thing I pulled out of that, for example, Larry Fink's, of course, the famous CEO of BlackRock, he said, nobody's paying attention to this, but the most important jobs for the future are essentially jobs of the past, that we need expert electricians. We need people who can build data centers. And it was so interesting. I'm a fix-it guy and I love that. And I'm just always thinking about that. And it got me thinking, because when I was doing my research, one of the things that I recommended to people is to think about the data they already have and try to deploy it in a way that will help them measure and gauge ROI and progress. And if anybody is like me and has a garage and fixes things, and I have sort of redundant tools, and I have things, my wife's always like, don't you already have that? I'm like, I know. I don't know where that is. I don't know what bin that tube of whatever is. So I just buy it again. And my point was that at firms, and certainly in corporations, and that's why legal operations is such an incredible part of a law department. But there's all this data, there's all this information, there are all these resources, and we don't use all of them. And I don't know that necessarily you need to invest more. You just need to sort of, rethink where what you have is and what you've done, has where that's taken you, and figure out how you can use that with what you're now investing in to push you forward.
I'm doing webinars and in-person sessions on data and data strategy this year, and I think it's going to be. I can't wait. We've had a lot of conversations about data already, and it's going to be another year of really starting to learn from people. This is what I'm excited about. I'm doing a webinar coming up with Elite where we're going to be looking at some success stories, maybe get a client on. We're in the early stages of just prepping it, but the more people, the more end users that we can get on talking about their experiences, the better, I think. Like in terms of, okay, we've done this and this is how and what we've learned and these are the challenges and these are maybe the mistakes.
Wow.
um,
Wow, Caroline, I'm excited for our next
excited,
episode. It's
Ari.
so there's a lot happening here, but we'll try to chart that change. Boom!
Charting change in legal.
All right. Well, wonderful to see you. Wonderful to all of our viewers and our listeners. And I'm just overwhelmed with the attention. Great, great episode. Thank you.
Thanks, Ari. Bye, everyone.